This moves us out of the strepsirrhines into the most primitive haplorhine, which is the tarsier. So now we can talk about kind of the ones that facially look like you with a fused upper lip. When we look at the strepsirrhine haplorhine boundary, um, it is the tarsier that has a number of features that make it more closely related to haplorhines than strepsirrhines. And those traits include, of course, definitively haplorhini, which is the lack of a fused upper lip and wet nose. Matter of fact, it is a nose that's separated from the mouth, and the lip is fused, right? Nice straight lip. There's also something that happens with the tarsier, and it is inherited and retained in monkeys, apes, and us, and that's the loss of the tapetum lucidum, right? So the tarsier, monkeys, all apes, and us, we don't have reflective eyes, and so um, this is something that makes us all haplorhines. When you look at the derived trait of haplorhini, you can see that it is a dry external nose that is separated from the mouth and the upper lip is fused. We see that here in the tarsier. You can see it easily looking straight, head on an orangutan and a vervet monkey, and of course you, the human, but not the dog. Remember, a dog has strepsirrhini. They are an ancestral mammal. And this brings us specifically to Tarsius or the tarsier. And tarsier, again, um, being the most primitive haplorhine, uh, was thought to be included in some of the more primitive primates like strepsirrhines because they have really small body size. You can kind of see this one on a tree, very tiny creature, and very small, even smaller than some of the lorises. But when we were able to examine it in the wild more carefully and closely, as well as bits and pieces of their anatomy and skeleton, it looked like they're more closely related to some of the anthropoids like monkeys and apes than the more primitive primates like prosimians and strepsirrhines that they were eventually included in the haplorhines. And rightfully so, this is both demonstrated in genotype and phenotype. We look at the profile of Tarsius or the tarsier. They only live in Southeast Asia. Matter of fact, some of them live in some very excluded rainforests on remote islands. Some, like the pygmy tarsier, we thought was extinct, but it was discovered in the Philippine Islands, um, a number of years ago. So look at their body size, 3.5 ounces, very, very small, right? That's like a quarter, less than a quarter of a pound. They're all nocturnal, and if you think about it, they do not have a tapetum lucidum. They have um, lost this adaptation. And how are you going to be active at night? Well, they have huge, massive, gigantic eyes. Matter of fact, they have eyes that are bigger than their brain and eyes that are so large that they can't really even swivel in their sockets, so they have to move their head. And they commit to vertical clinging and leaping. As a matter of fact, they're um, one of one of the greatest leapers that we see among primates. They can leap, like 30 times their body length. They eat almost exclusively and hunt insects and other small reptiles like lizards. And they are varied in their social structure, both multi-male, multi-female, and some of them actually have monogamous relationships that they'll pair bond for life. And this is why the tarsier is a bit confusing because it does have some ancestral and derived traits. And this happens when you look in evolutionary biology, where you will have a number of different organisms that will kind of be right in between, both some ancestral and some derived traits. And that's exactly what we're going to do in the last part of the course. Is you're going to see a number of creatures that are intermediary between apes and us, and it sometimes can be challenging. Well, where do they fall on the tree in between us? And that's where the tarsier is. It actually does have two grooming claws. It doesn't have a tooth comb like lemurs and lorises or other strepsirrhines, but it does have an unfused mandibular symphysis like strepsirrhines. It has a number of other derived traits, though, that make it more closely related to monkeys and apes, and thus included in the haplorhines, like the fused upper lip. They do not have a wet nose. They have a smaller snout. They do have some postorbital closure. This is bony fillings in the back of the eye orbits. You'll see that all monkeys and apes have this. So they have some of it, whereas strepsirrhines do not at all, and they retained the ancestral condition of mammals. They do not have a tabetum lucidum, and they do not have a split upper lip, right? They are haplorhines. So if you look at the tarsier here in this image, they do not have reflective eyes or tapetum lucidum, but they're nocturnal. This makes it a challenge. How are they going to be able to be active at night? Well, the evolutionary solution there is having huge, gigantic eyes.